Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your man Chuck Creekmur, aka Jigsaw, here at One World Studios. I'm here with Reverend Conrad Tillard, who was once known as the hip hop minister. He was also formerly known as Conrad Muhammad. And I grew up, I'll just say this, and when I say grew up, I was grown, but I was looking
Sure.
upward to those that were really moving, shaking, impacting hip hop culture in a way that represented a certain level of consciousness, a certain level of morality, and also was getting in between things when it started to get out of hand. So I want to first of all say I thank you for your work, and I'm happy to have you here at allhiphop.com.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I've been an admirer of your work for many years.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes, sir.
We're Facebook friends. I don't know if
Absolutely.
that's anything to flex about, but we definitely have had that sort of relationship, and from afar probably been seeing what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but we had a conversation about a week or so ago, and we just talked about certain things. It feels like that was a lifetime ago because now a lot has changed as well in the world, with our new president as well, certain actions from certain artists around that scenario. So, first of all, before we get into any of that, for folks that might not know, tell them who you are and what you mean to hip hop culture. First of all, before we go back.
Well, I won't be presumptuous to say that I mean anything to hip hop culture, but I will say that I had the good fortune of becoming a minister in the golden age of hip hop, and I had the good fortune of being the national student and youth minister of the Nation of Islam, and then later the minister of Mosque Number 7 in Harlem. So, from the standpoint of being a minister, you couldn't have been in a better place than I was in the 1980s, 90s, and 2000s. And then, of course, we founded a movement for change after we left the nation, and that was the first hip hop political organization. And I'll talk more about that. But I have tried to be a brother to the hip hop community, and I've been a friend and a brother, and tried to help when there was confusion, tried to give guidance. I was fortunate because, I didn't really like the term hip hop minister. Peter Noel was a writer for the Village Voice, and he used to cover the nation, and he labeled me this really what he was saying is this little hip hop minister. Okay.
Right.
And of course,
Yeah.
I didn't like that because you have to remember number 7 is where Minister Farrakhan had been the minister and Malcolm X. And I had members in the congregation that were under those men.
Right.
And so I'm trying to be their minister. And certainly I didn't need any reminder that I was a part of the hip hop generation. But then a very dear friend of mine helped me to understand, Drew Dixon. She said to me one day,
shout out to Drew Dixon.
yeah, she said, you are a member of the hip hop generation. You should embrace that. And she gave me a different perspective, and I did embrace it. And later, I even used the moniker. So, yeah, and of course, in 1997, I left the nation, and I went back to school. I went to Harvard Divinity School. And about a year later, I returned to the church where I had grown up. And I was licensed and ordained to the gospel ministry from Dr. Butts, Calvin Butts, at Abyssinian in Harlem. And so for the last 25 years, I've pastored in Boston, Roxbury, and been in Bedford-Stuyvesant for many years. So I've had the fortune of having a base in Harlem and Bedford-Stuyvesant.
Wow, there's so much there's so much to unpack there. So, for those that don't know, Calvin Butts was infamous in that he steamrolled over
That's
hip
right.
hop CDs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was in the 90s when hip hop was at its, the golden era, at
Absolutely.
its zenith. Um, and then you're also at that same time in the nation.
Right.
Obviously, your dealings with him were later, but I'm trying to figure out where this question comes to me. But
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of begs the question, where do you fit in
Mm-hmm.
to all of this?
Yeah, well, Dr. Bus and I, we were friends,
Okay.
but he had a different approach.
Yes.
But I respected his approach. But
Mm-hmm.
even then, I counseled him it's better to engage the rappers
Mm-hmm.
and then change them.
Yeah.
But I understood his outrage.
Yes.
I understood C. Dolores Tucker's outrage
Mm-hmm.
because you have to remember this was a generation that had just come through the civil rights movement.
Yes.
I remember when one of my other mentors, Mr. Percy Sutton,
Mm-hmm.
would not play hip hop on his stations,
Mm-hmm.
BLS and LIB,
Right.
because they had come through the generation of blacks that were degraded, insulted
Mm-hmm.
with the word nigger and boy and all of these things. And when they saw the young generation coming up, uh, putting out that kind of music for that generation, that deeply troubled them. I mean, C. Dolores Tucker is like your grandmother, my grandmother. She was outraged to hear black women projected in that manner. And later, I would raise my voice against those things as well, but I did have a rapport with the artist.
Right.
Now, later, some of the moguls, Diddy, Russell Simmons, tried to attack me, but I was already rooted in the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so my critique, they had to deal with a little differently than Dr. Butt's critique. But he was, he also, and people shouldn't forget this, that when Bill Clinton attacked Sister Soldier in 1992, Butts had Sister Soldier in Abyssinian speaking to the community. He put his arms around her. And when Aaliyah was killed, died in a plane crash, we had a big service for her there. So, Butts was always there. And so, I think that's important to balance that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't like to speak the obvious, but I don't think everything is obvious.
Mm-hmm.
For those of us that were reared in the golden era, if you
Right,
will,
right.
the Nation of Islam was
Absolutely.
always there. In college, we used the nation to protect us at our parties. The artists had them in the lyrics.
Absolutely.
They were a part of some of them were even rappers themselves.
Right.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that contextually and obviously hip hop it comes out of the civil rights movement, but then there are other things as well, the nation being one of them.
Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I would say the nation foremost.
Okay.
Because, and even going back to the founding of hip hop, people forget that, Bambaataa and the founders of hip hop, they would have been under the influence of Minister Farrakhan's voice, who was still in New York at number 7 in 71, 72, 73, around the origins of hip hop. There was a big gang conflict that took place after the death of Black Benji, and there was a big meeting at Whole Avenue Boys Club. He spoke to the gangs in those
Farrakhan?
yes,
Minister
in
Farrakhan?
those days,
Okay.
right? And so there was a long history that predated. Plus, I teach hip hop at my at City College, CCNY, in the Black Studies department, and one of the most foundational influences in hip hop is the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths,
Yes.
which comes directly out of the Nation of Islam.
Absolutely.
So both of the two most fundamental organizations that influence hip hop, 5% Nation of Gods and Earth and Zulu Nation, were both greatly impacted by the Nation of Islam.
Right.
And so the other thing that was taking place was that, Jesse Jackson in '84, he ran for president. And that was a resurgent moment for people of our generation. We missed Dr. King and Malcolm and Mr. Muhammad, we were children when he died. I was only 10 years old. But when Jesse stood up and ran for president, that was a revival of the spirit of the 60s. People don't know this, but he was beginning to organize the rappers. Tupac performed at a fundraiser at the Apollo Theater for Jesse Jackson when he was 13 years old. During Jesse's first campaign.
Wow. Tupac performed for Jesse?
Tupac performed at a fundraiser for Jesse Jackson at the Apollo when he was a teenager. Okay. Sister Soldier was very involved. Kevin Powell, Chuck D. So many people were impacted by Jesse's first run for president. But at that same time, Minister Farrakhan was also rebuilding the nation. And so his militant voice rose to the forefront. And that happened to coincide with the rise of Public Enemy and the level of political consciousness and awareness in hip-hop, and it all came together. And, it was, of course, Professor Griff was a member of the Nation of Islam. The S1Ws were members of the Nation of Islam. The other members of Public Enemy were impacted by the Nation. And then, of course, you had a slew of other rappers around that time that were impacted that way. Plus, I will admit, the church did not really understand hip-hop culture. Jesse understood because he's a man of tremendous outreach, but the church didn't understand it. And, they say we're in a post-Christian era, but that was sort of the beginning of a post-Christian era for young people because Islam greatly impacted our generation. And so it was the Nation that sort of emerged as the go-to. And, listen, I know Reverend Sharpton. Reverend Sharpton wasn't connected with the hip-hop community in those days. We've already talked about Dr. Butt's relationship. But the hip-hop community needed a place where they could go. They needed a mosque that they could come to and hear a message or get married. Or I counseled couples. And, of course, when the beef started, we were there to provide direction and guidance. And this is at a time when I remind my students where there was tremendous lack of concern for young people in America. This is right during the crack era. And so the hip-hop community needed a community-based organization that could hold them accountable, that they could be in dialogue with. And that's what we did. And it wasn't just here in New York. It was L.A., Dr. Conrad Muhammad, and all of these folks that were engaged in that process. But here in New York, we had so many brothers, Brother Elijah, Brother Arthur. We had so many brothers that had come out of the Zulu Nation, had come out of the 5% Nation. And so they had great connections to these movements. And as their minister, I was able to connect with these people. So, yeah, that's very important.
So I Googled you, and I see pictures of you and a lot of people. Tupac is one of the most, I was like, oh, wow. He kind of was around Pac, which surprised me. How well did you know him?
I didn't know Pac very well, but I knew him better toward around 94. I have a hard time explaining to my children, Tupac was not the iconic figure in 94 and 95 that he would become. I'm sorry, 93 and 94, that he would become in 95 and 96, right before his death, that 9 months that he was in California. And also when he was in jail, we were able to connect. And so, he's a beautiful brother. He came out of the movement.
He's a Panther Cub.
A Panther Cub. But I think for him, his idea was to be the most accessible, relatable thug, if you will, to borrow his phrase, and then flip it to get people to a higher level of consciousness. I disagree with that ideology because once you take people down that road, it's very hard to pull them up. But I do know that that was his intention, and he
Good
articulated
intention.
that to me. Oh, absolutely. He was only 25 when he died.
Right.
So, I'm not the man. I wasn't the man at 25 that I am today.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Well, let's. I could obviously I could talk to you about your history and things like that for forever, but let's discuss. Well, I'd like to, if you will, talk about your exit from the nation and how does that, if at all, impact what you do now?
Yeah,
Because because
Okay, sure.
by the way, I did not realize it was in '97. I don't know what my brain processed that as, but that's a long time
It's a very
ago.
long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, time waits on no man.
Right.
Um, the interesting thing about my ministry is that I actually started with Jesse Jackson. I was a student leader and got involved in his first campaign. The second campaign of Jesse Jackson in '88, the first meeting of that campaign was in Cleveland, Ohio. There were 3 people in that meeting. There was Jesse Jackson, Dr. Ron Daniels, who teaches at York College, and myself.
Okay.
And so I was very close to Reverend Jackson. I didn't work with him in the second campaign because by that time I had already become a member and a minister in the nation, and there was tension between his camp and the nation. So, but my point is, my commitment to the African American community, black people, started before I joined the nation.
Okay.
But it was greatly enhanced by what I learned in the nation. There's not a greater movement to teach you how to be a leader among all levels of African American people. So I benefited from that greatly, that leadership development. And in 1997, there were some internal things going on in the nation, and I couldn't really tell you exactly what happened that preceded my leaving the nation. I met with the minister in '96, maybe in 6 months before February of '97. And he said to me, all of my laborers want you to be removed. He said, but when I asked him the question, who would you replace him with? He said, the conversation stops because there is no replacement for you in New York. He said, I give you an A for your representation of me and your work in that city. But 6 months later, I was out of Mosque number 7.
Right.
He invited me to come to Chicago to live, but at that point I had decided that I wanted to do my own thing, at least from the standpoint I decided to go to school in Boston. I was still a member of the nation. In fact, I was the first Nation of Islam member accepted at Harvard Divinity School.
Okay.
First Nation of Islam minister.
Wow.
And my intention was to go there, and he said he would send me to Al-Azhar in Cairo, Egypt, after that for my doctorate. But in that year, some things happened, and I left. And one of the things that I did when I was at Harvard, I took a class in the Kennedy School of Government. And they gave us an exercise. It said, you have to form an organization. And I had been working on this in my mind. So I formed the organization called a Movement for Change. I was only 33 years old at the time. I had been the minister at number 7 for 7 years. And so Movement for Change stood for conscious hip-hop activism necessary for global empowerment. Now, keep in mind, the business community had seen the potential of hip-hop. Okay, by that time, There was Sean John. I don't know if there was Sean John yet, but there was certainly Carl
Fat Farm
Kanai.
was,
There was the Fat Farm. There was Crisscross. So the business community saw the potential of this. There were all kind of other collaborations.
Right.
The fashion industry saw the importance of streetwear and that connection. Certainly the entertainment industry, the movies and television programs, and other areas of American life. But the one area that had never yet made the connection with hip hop was the electoral political process. Now, hip hop was always political, but not in the electoral sense.
Right.
See, nobody was saying we're going to vote for so and so, or we're going to organize to use our power. So I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to call together the hip hop community, which is multicultural, multi-ethnic, okay? But we're going to be a political demographic. Immediately, I called Russell Simmons. I called Puffy. I called all of these moguls. And I said, this is what we have to do, okay? And we started meeting in Harlem. And I said, hands that once scratched turntables would one day pick a president. Now, I stole that from Jesse Jackson and remixed it. Because he said during the 84 campaign, hands that once picked cotton would one day pick a president.
Right.
But I said, well, no, hands that once scratched turntables will one day pick a president. And I said that if Jesse Ventura, he was at the time the governor of Minnesota. He had gone from being a wrestler to the governor.
Right.
I said, well, Fat Joe, ironically, I used him a lot, and Chuck D, different ones. I said, you can become a congressman. You talk about the hood. You can now be in charge of the resources in the hood. I went to Detroit. There was a city council, a state representative. And I said, you can be the first hip-hop mayor, Kwame Kilpatrick. I mean, there were many around the country, and we registered tens of thousands of people to vote. And for a moment, Russell Simmons wanted to work with me, but Russell wanted to deliver the hip-hop generation to the Democrats. There's always this impulse in our leaders to essentially, we're going to organize you politically, but the only purpose of it is to give you over to the Democrats. And I said, no. I said, if we're going to organize the hip-hop generation, it should be an independent, thinking generation that leverages our influence with either party to say, who has the best deal for us? Okay? That's where we should be. You're not conformist in any other area of life. Why are you so bad in every other area of life? Why are you so you so militant and strong and in many ways dysfunctional and antisocial? Right. But then in politics, you're going to get over here and be a good boy for the Democrats. That doesn't make sense to me. And so we fell out because obviously we couldn't work together. And quite honestly, he and Puffy and all of them really organized against me in 2000, 2001. Okay. They really organized against me to sort of try to take that movement over. And well, two things happened. Number one, I was fighting all of them and some of the ministers who had sort of come in with them. And then I had had a powerful conversion experience, and I had returned to the church. And at one point, I just let it go. I think we had made the impact. We had sort of established the template. Vibe magazine did a 6-page profile on the Movement for Change program. Okay. So the work had been done, and eventually, I'm very happy to say that not only did hip hop ultimately produce a lot of hip hop generation political candidates. When you see people like AOC and others, that's a direct manifestation.
Hakeem Jeffries is reciting Biggie lyrics.
That's a direct manifestation of that. All of them came up under my voice and under the work that we were doing. But here's the other thing. The hip-hop generation did one day elect the first black president of the United States, because it was the multiracial, multi-ethnic. It was the acceptance of young whites and Latinos and people of different races, of black men in hip hop that were leaders, that were moguls, that were business people, that ultimately changed American attitudes, because when Jesse ran in '84, a lot of white America could not see themselves voting for him. Yeah. But by the time Obama came and that hip hop, or that Obama, they call it the Obama coalition. Really, it's the hip hop coalition took him over, and we saw our first black president. So a lot of people try to forget about a movement for change. A lot of people try to write it out of history. But what we did in Harlem had a great impact on that. And so that's the work that I found after the nation. And then, you know, I went back into pastoral ministry, and that's what I've been doing.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
When you see Russell and Diddy now,
Right.
what do you think?
I don't see them.
I mean,
obviously, Russell's in Bali,
right.
and Brother Diddy's in prison. The last time I saw Brother Diddy was at Heavy D's funeral. And you know how long ago
I was there.
Yeah, up in Mount Vernon at Grace Baptist Church. So I don't see them, but as with Suge Knight, you know, I met him in '93, and I told Suge, I said, you know, you are an incredible man. You know, I really respect you. I hear what you're saying and what you're doing. But if you don't stop this, you're going to destroy everything that you built. And, you know, I say to your listeners, we all have feet of clay. We're all humans. We're only going to be here for a certain season. Psalms 91:10 reminds us that, you know, if we're lucky, we're going to live 70 or 80 years. And after that, and for the most part, that's the end of this earthly life. And so we need to be aware of that. We need to try to do good. And it's hurting to me that all of these moguls built these tremendous businesses and created a voice for the African American community. But because we were kind of blinded by arrogance and lost the sense of mission, we squandered it. And, you know, hedonism and all of these things, we squandered it. And that's really sad when you think about it, because it's like Tupac. He was born in poverty and in struggle. He rose up through a mother that was crack addicted. He came up as an artist with only a dream and became the most celebrated artist in America at that time and in the annals of history. And yet he died like a common gangbanger. And so we got to figure out as black people, how do we win? How do we win even when we've won? And that requires a lot of discipline. It also requires not forgetting that we're only 3 or 4 generations out of slavery, maybe 5. And so we are still climbing up. We still have a lot of work to do. And we're throwing up, making it rain. We could be enforcing and enriching and helping our black colleges and our institutions, building new institutions, supporting the ones that we have. We can still have fun. We can still do all the things but we have to understand we haven't made it yet. And I wouldn't do the things that you saw other people do, because you probably won't be able to get away with it.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of talk about the tapes, by the way, and they say, "Oh, such and such is on these tapes." And
wow.
yeah, I was around for that period, but I wasn't indulging in any of that stuff. So
Yeah, I went
yeah,
to a few Diddy parties, but I didn't go to that kind.
right,
And I always went with the brothers, so I
right,
have witnesses.
right,
And I was in and out.
right, right,
That's the one thing. I always engaged the culture,
right.
but I knew my place as a minister, and
Hmm.
I just wanted to show respect and
Yeah,
in and out.
right, right. Well, what's your take now? Like we're
Hmm.
here in 2025. Um, I don't want to be so specific, but let's just go to the latest event
Hmm.
where Snoop, Rick Ross, and
Hmm.
Soldier Boy and Nelly they
Right,
all performed at a gala around the inauguration.
right,
It's a lot of talk,
right,
names being thrown.
right. Foolishness.
Yeah.
Because first of all, to call a man an Uncle Tom because he performs at the Republican event presupposes that you think the Democrats are revolutionaries for you,
Uh-huh.
and they aren't.
Right.
So you mean to tell me if Megan Thee Stallion performs for Kamala Harris, that's different than Nelly or Snoop performing for Donald Trump? It isn't. Both of these political parties are corporate in nature. They both have essentially a vision of America as a capitalist nation, which it is.
Uh-huh.
They both are very partial to banks and technology and so forth and so on. And they're pretty much the same with the exception of a few positions on social issues, okay? For example, Trump said the other day in his inaugural message that under his administration, there'll be two genders recognized in America. So there's some difference on social issues, but that's about it. And so what I say to black people is you should participate in both parties. I've been pushing for the last 20 years what I call a 70-30 plan. And the 70-30 plan says 70% of us, if you want to stay in the Democratic Party, stay there. That's fine. 30% should go over and sit in the Republican Party and advocate for us there.
Right.
See, most groups could care less who wins the presidency. Because in politics, it's never about um, who's in office. What it's about is, are your interests before the people in office? See, we cannot afford as black people to sit out for 4 years and point fingers and talk bad about Donald Trump. That would be foolish. He's the president for the next 4 years. The Jewish community is going to be there. They got things that are important to them, and they're going to be there to talk to him about those issues. Women are going to be there. They're going to say, hey, this is important to us. The LGBTQ community is going to be there. And black people sitting on the sideline with rocks in their jaws for 4 years. And I learned a long time ago, if you don't show up, it makes it easier for people to ignore you.
Right.
So people were saying, well, Trump, I don't see no blacks in his cabinet. Well, you just called the man a Hitler for 4 years and said he was an existential threat to the country. Did you think he was going to ask you then to serve in his cabinet? But we listen to people who are black leaders, but really they're Democratic leaders because they're being paid by the Democratic Party. So they create a lot of outrage. Roland Martin, he's a bully. He creates a lot of outrage when black people use their common sense and say, we're in a two-party system. I'm going to deal with the Republicans. But he's getting paid. The records came out. He got $350,000 from Kamala Harris. So we have to stop as black people. We live in a two-party political system. First of all, if you've never taken a civics class, if you don't know how the country was founded, how it operates, if you don't understand why the Electoral College is important to picking a president in the United States, you really aren't qualified to talk about these things. And you should learn these things because it's your country. And nobody, if you look at the election results, there's not one group other than blacks that voted for one candidate 96%.
Right.
It's almost like nullifying your vote. because here's what it does. It says to the Republicans, don't even try to get their vote. Don't even, it's a waste of time. And it says to the Democrats, you don't have to do anything for them. You already got their vote, and they ain't going nowhere.
Right.
See, when you tell a party, I will never vote Republican, all you're doing is telling the party you vote for, you don't have to worry about them. They aren't going anywhere. Right. You don't even have to, let's spend our resources trying to get these other groups that actually make us have to chase them. This one, they aren't going anywhere. So that's a foolish political strategy. And so I'm happy when I see people like Nelly and Snoop. After all, they're Americans, and it's their national inauguration. And as Nelly said, he's honored to have been asked. And there's nothing wrong with that. And black people got to stop this foolishness. The Democratic Party, they are not the Black Panthers. They are not the Nation of Islam. They are not the Universal Negro Improvement Association. They are not us. They are not organizations, an organization dedicated to the freedom and empowerment of black people. It's a political party. That's all it is. And we got to be present in both so that when the issues come up, our voices are heard. That's why we do get a little more from the Democrats today. We do. Yeah. Not nearly enough in terms of what we should get. Joe Biden just left office. He didn't pardon Jesse Jackson Jr. He didn't pardon Marilyn Mosby, our sister down in Baltimore. Okay, he pardoned his brothers and sisters. But we don't get as much from the Republicans because we simply aren't in the room.
Well,
we aren't in the room.
We aren't in the. Well, some of us are in the room.
Very few.
Some.
Not enough.
Right.
Not enough.
The question
and
that
who are the ones that you say are in the room?
Well, the room. Yeah,
so, I mean, there are a few. Byron Donaldson is a congressman out of Florida, but you got to remember, he represents a white district.
Right.
So, you know, in order to be heard, we got to be in that room.
So let me ask you about the results, say, of a Donald Trump administration.
Yes.
You know, we've seen they're rolling back diversity and inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion. The atmosphere, it feels unsafe.
It felt safe the day before the election?
I won't say the day before because
no, I'm just asking.
But my thing is bullies are pretty courageous. The guys behind the bully, I should say. You know, whenever I had a bully, there was about 2 or 3 guys behind him, and then you hit the bully, and they all go away. This was what that feels like to me. This feels, 10 years ago, you could stare down somebody and they would back down. Now you feel like you need to be holding heat because you might get shot.
Well, you know.
So the atmosphere feels less safe for black folks and other folks as well. So it's not necessarily you're just a Republican per se, but you were also this new MAGA Republican.
Well, you know, I've heard that, Brother Creekmur, and I just have not felt that. I mean, in my community, I'm concerned, my safety, and again, you know, when people talk about voter suppression, I've run for office twice in this city. There's never been a Ku Klux Klan member standing in Bedford-Stuyvesant in any of the polls that I voted for, and yet I've seen hundreds of thousands of black people who don't vote. So I don't see voter suppression. I see apathy. I don't see, and again, I don't live in an area where people, black folks feel threatened. I can't speak to that. I really can't speak to that. But I think, though, we are being programmed, and I do think that that's the hype that, you know, I don't see Trump as an ideological person. Trump is a New Yorker. He's been a Democrat his whole life. And I find it hard to believe that all of these rappers, all these black politicians, Reverend Jackson, Reverend Sharpton, Mike Tyson. All these people could be fine. Trump was fine with everybody. And that's after Central Park. That's after he took out the ad.
Respectfully,
Sure.
we were in different times then.
Well, what's the different time?
Well,
but my point
I
is,
wasn't a New Yorker, so I can't speak to that.
well, you're in the tri-state area, so.
Well, I'm originally from Delaware.
Okay.
And I hadn't heard of the Central
Oh,
Park
you had not
Five.
heard of it? Okay. Well, the thing people would need to understand about that is at the time, and Yusuf Salam is a brother beloved to me. The day before he went to prison, he was at my mosque in Harlem.
Okay.
The day he came out, he joined the Movement for Change 13 years later.
Okay.
And so Yusuf Salam is a brother beloved. And at the time when Trump took that full-page ad that he's talked about, where he called for the death penalty, he, I guess, was outraged that a white woman had been beaten, and then they had confessed to it. Later, we found out that the confessions were coerced. And Trump did say what he said, and turns out he was wrong. But what people don't remember is that every white Democrat in New York said the same thing.
Fair
Ed
enough.
Koch and others.
Yeah.
And here's the part that they don't talk about. Most Negro leaders in that time were not standing with those children.
Okay.
We were. His mother was one of the most faithful people in walking around that Harlem community, never letting people know that Yusuf and those boys were innocent. And there were very few.
You're saying?
Yusuf's mom. Yes, she was stalwart. But there were very few black people that supported them as well.
Right.
And so I say that Trump was wrong like a lot of people, okay? And when they were exonerated, he should have apologized.
Absolutely.
And I think that he needs to do that because, you know, when you're exonerated, okay, and you're proven innocent, a man should be able to say, you know, I was wrong.
Right.
Okay. But other than that, I don't single him out for any particular.
Because
Joe Biden made a speech in 1994 and 96 rather, and pushed a crime bill that got hundreds of thousands of young black men arrested, created the law that created the disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine, which his son used, and he pardoned his son, and yet people I went to school with end up doing 30 years in jail. And so there's a pox on all of these people's houses. That's why we got to get out of this evaluation. You know, the simplistic, narrow-minded, unimaginative way black people look at politics is Democrats good, Republicans bad.
Right.
And we've got to get out of that rather dim-witted analysis. We need a much more thorough analysis. It's not you don't have to like people to do business with them. All you have to recognize is they're in power. We have to put our agenda before them. And that's what black leaders used to do. Dr. King was a Republican, okay? But he didn't care whether you were Republican or Democrat. His concern was the advancement of rights for black people. Today, our leaders are more concerned about the advancement of democratic politics. And let me tell you something about DEI.
What? Go ahead.
DEI, as it was written and as it was enforced, did help some black women. Did nothing for black men, for the most part.
Okay.
And it helped many other groups that were brought into positions of authority and power that they had never been in before. Okay? But it did not help black men. You probably can't name 10 people or 5 even black brothers that will lose their job because DEI is rolled back. I know you can't.
I can't because I am an independent.
I know, but you know a lot of people. If you can find me 5 black men
I'll look.
that have lost their position because of rollbacks of DEI, then I'd like to know. And so what I'm saying is the black community has to be very discriminating in the way we think because we're like the Trojan horse. We have the numbers, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't think. And so
Mm-hmm.
other groups say, let's hitch up to black folks. They'll provide the margin of victory,
Absolutely.
and we'll get the spoils of war.
Right.
And I'm saying we've got to stop that. We've got to say, black people, since Obama's election, we have too many black politicians that want to be Obamas. In other words, to appeal to everybody, to appeal to every race, every demographic. That was a special man for a special time. We need to get back to where we have black leaders that are not ashamed of, not afraid or reluctant to say, I am a leader for the African American community. I'm advocating for the black community. I'm advocating for the people that I represent, because every group deserves representation. You can't be everything to everybody and nothing to yourself.
And what would you say is the black agenda now?
Well, the black agenda should be, number one, understanding, and I've come to this. I didn't always feel this way, that we live in the greatest time in the history of the world, and we live in the best nation in the history of the world, if you're talking about individual rights, freedom, and economic opportunity, okay? We need to dispense with all of this move towards socialism, okay? And understand that only in America could a brother like Chuck Creekmur and his partner put together a network like you have put together. So the opportunities that you seize upon. So we got to orient our young people to stop complaining.
Okay.
My life is qualitatively better than my father's life. My life is very much better than my grandfather's life. I don't face the racism that they face. I don't face the discrimination that they face. And so we've got to, number one, develop that positive attitude and say, this is Don King used to say, only in America, only in America, only in America can someone go from Jay-Z, from the Rusty, Dusty, Marcy projects to the 1% in one generation. And so there are great opportunities in America. Doesn't mean there aren't problems,
Right.
but we focus more on the problems than we do on the opportunities. So that's what we've got to do. We've got to take advantage of the opportunities. We got to stop getting divorced.
Okay.
In the black community, listen, you've got to build a strong family structure. Our wealth is in our ability to build strong family structures. And we have too much divorce in the black community. We've got to also get back to positive cultural. I was saying to you earlier, hip hop has done some wonderful things, but it's done some bad things also. It took what was the most marginal culture in our community and it made it mainstream. There were always pimps. There were always hoes. There were always drug dealers, but they were marginal. There were always strippers. They were marginal. Hip hop made the most dysfunctional part of our community admirable. And so you've got middle-class young people, children of doctors and lawyers and school teachers trying to be ratchet. And that hurts us. So we got to get back to positive cultural values. Got to promote education. We got to embrace capitalism. And we have to get back to a more firm grasp of the American political system. Because as Jesse Jackson always says, when the rules are public, if the basket on your side is 10 feet, on my side is 10 feet, the floor is level, and the rules are public, we can thrive. We're not effective in the American political system because we don't understand the American political system. We conflate and confuse politics with religion and movement. And they're two different things. In politics, in religion, you do it with your head, but you mostly do it with your heart, okay? In the movement, you're giving your life and your efforts to a cause you believe in.
Right.
Politics is far more transactional.
Yeah.
First
absolutely.
of all, you shouldn't ever believe in any politician. You do business with them, but you don't believe in them.
Right.
When you've sat down with executives, you don't believe in them, right?
Yeah.
You do business with them, and you have to watch them and make sure your lawyers check out your contracts and so forth. That's the way we have to approach politics.
What are we getting from Trump, from your vantage point?
Well,
Are you a Trump supporter?
No,
Are you?
well, let me just say this. I'm a Democrat. I'm a lifelong Democrat.
Okay.
I've never been anything other than a Democrat.
Okay.
But I will vote for Republicans, okay? And because I vote for the candidate, okay?
Okay.
I vote for the person that I believe will lead the country in the direction that it should go in. And for me, that's the way we need to
Do you believe Donald Trump is the best person?
I think that when you look at where America had gone under Joe Biden,
And where would that be?
a border overrun with illegal immigrants. There was a preacher that preached the other day at an interfaith service for Trump, and she raised the issue of the immigrants. America's a nation of immigrants.
Absolutely.
Okay, there's no question about it. But every nation has a right to control its borders and have an orderly immigration process.
Okay.
The day Joe Biden came into office, he overturned some of the things that Trump had put in place, sort of stay in Mexico. Okay, if you're an asylum seeker, stay in Mexico until your court date comes up, until we're able to evaluate. Because one thing America does not do and can't do is we can't. Everybody in the world wants to come here. Okay, and that's why I tell our young people, you don't know how great your country is, how great the opportunities are. But people are not walking through jungles and coming from all over the world to come here if this place is so bad. They're not doing it. One thing we've never had to do is build a wall to keep people in the way the Soviet Union did.
Right.
And so what we have to do, all right, and I really think this is important.
Okay.
You say, what are black people going to get from Trump?
Yeah.
So that's a question of basic political philosophy. The Democrats' basic political philosophy has been, since the late 1960s, to promise blacks and other minority groups free things, okay, such as welfare, okay? The Republicans are a party that believe in small government. Now, whether you agree with one or the other, one believes in big government, okay? So that one says, we're going to give you a lot of different things. Now, what they give us really amounts to nothing, okay? All right? The other party says, no, we don't believe in giving people anything. But we do believe in small government, a lack of regulations, so that if you want to start a business, if you want to go out and do business, we want to create a climate in which you can become an entrepreneur and do things for yourself. Now, that's the basic framework of the two political parties. So when you say, what are we going to get from Trump? The first thing that we have to do as black people, you got to be in the room. So from next time, we got to understand, you can't not be in the room. It's like when the Lakers and the Celtics play for the championship. You put all your eggs on the Celtics. And then when the Lakers are celebrating and popping the champagne bottles, you say, where's mine?
Right. Oh, I see what you're saying.
I mean,
Yeah.
you understand what I'm saying? That's
But you
why,
playing for the other team, so you wouldn't.
But this is my point.
Right.
That's why we should never put ourselves in a position of just being in one party. We got to do like other groups. We got to make sure that there are blacks strategically located in every party. So no matter who wins, there's somebody black in that room can say, I helped you all get here. Black people, we were here, we were present, and you have to, these are our concerns. And that's the way American politics works.
But who black do you know is representing in that fashion?
Well,
So-
we don't have enough. I mean, we have some great ones.
Well, just give me 1, 2, 3.
Well, this is my
Because I don't know those people.
Well, and you should, because we have some great black people in the Republican Party in terms of their wisdom. Like most young black people have never heard of a man named Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell is an economist. This dude
He's black?
Yeah, absolutely, out of Harlem.
Uh-huh.
One of the heaviest cats that you would ever read, one of the heaviest thinkers. Walter Williams, another Republican, really heavy dude. Bob Woodson, Robert L. Woodson. These are people who believe, ironically, these to me are blacker than the Democratic leaders, because what they basically believe in is that black people have always been able to advance in this country through strong family structure, through entrepreneurship, and not relying on the government to take care of them.
Right.
And they have statistics. Soul is a very, he theorizes that it wasn't until the mid-'60s with Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, the welfare state, he says, destroyed rather than help the black community, it destroyed the black community. And he points out how only 20% of black children were born out of wedlock prior to the Great Society and welfare, and afterwards, today, numbers in excess of 80% of black children are born out of wedlock. So we got to learn. We got to, and that's what we have to do.
Yeah, well,
and that's how we get. In
There's-
other words, that's how we get on that side of the table. Because let me just say this lastly on the point. And see, one thing I respect about the Jewish community is that if Trump wins, the issues that are important to them, they will have people that are advocating for those. When Biden won, they would have people advocating for the issues that they think are important. Indians, Catholics, all of these groups, the black community is the only group that lines up, puts all of their chips on one horse.
right.
They either win, and when they win, we don't actually get much, or we lose. And that's what we find ourselves in, a position where, but thank God, about 12% of black people, 12 to 14%, voted for Trump. He has recognized that he would not have gotten over the hump without the black and Latino vote, and hopefully that will open the Republican Party up to understand that they can't win with an all-white party in an increasingly diversified America. But we got to be on both sides of the political equation.
Interesting.
See, you don't get this.
I
You got to tune in to Conversations with Conrad. That's my podcast on YouTube. But most black leaders, as far as I'm concerned, are committing leadership malpractice because they're directing black people one way.
I happen to believe that we have no true leaders.
Okay.
And that's my problem. That's my issue. We don't have leaders that are able to engage with not only politicians but also the people. So we have politicians that most people don't know who they are, and even some like say Hakeem Jeffries or whomever, you might not even hear them if they don't do certain things that you might identify with. But the old age of leadership is pretty much dead, and I find that a lot of the more liberal media outlets will not platform those of us that are the ones that are leaders, and Fox absolutely won't. And I can speak to that side because I was one of those people, and it got to the point where they were like, "Hey, we need you to say this," and I'm gonna say no, I can't. I can't do that. And so I wouldn't get on Fox anymore.
Yeah, well,
so I think that there are definitely issues on both sides of the fence, but I also feel like there's a very hostile side to the MAGA form of the Republican Party, and I think that's the most problematic part of all of this, right?
Well,
so
when you say hostile, what do you mean?
Well, hostile. You can go to a rally and get beat up, which happened. You can see our sister, a black woman, attacked physically at a rally a MAGA rally.
Well,
specifically.
I've
so
seen,
this is not
I've
Dr.
seen
King's.
I've seen
this is
Christian pastors attacked by LBGT groups for standing up and saying in various settings that what they're doing is wrong. So
right, but but Kyle Rittenhouse or those types of attacks. I'm not here to stand up for LGBTQ plus. They have
I'm
their
not
own.
here to put them down. I'm just simply saying. See, I have no faith in either political party.
Okay.
So I don't drink the Kool-Aid, and I don't espouse, because for me there are two sides of every issue.
Right.
Every issue, even Kyle Rittenhouse. Okay. I mean,
what's the good side of that?
There was no good side. The man was in the midst of a riot or rebellion. He had been attacked, and he fought back.
No, his mother drove him to he's 17 years old.
No. He lived in a town, a border city, like Brooklyn and Queens. And I'm not here to defend him.
Okay.
But what I don't like is how African Americans don't get the full side of an issue. Okay.
Okay.
They don't get the full side. See, when you listen to these Democratic outlets, MSNBC, these black people, they're black faces.
We don't listen to those though anymore.
So here's my position. I believe in a man's right to self-defense. Okay?
But he went to the fight. He didn't.
I believe in a man's right to self-defense.
Oh,
and
I do too.
When you talk about the rebellions in '92 in Los Angeles, and you talk about the riots or rebellions, depending on your perspective, in the '60s, after Dr. King was killed, 100 cities went up in fire.
Yes.
Okay. And as black people, we said we were tired, we were fired up, and we couldn't take it anymore.
Right.
Okay. I see January 6th the same way. White men, they were angry. White folks didn't say they were right, didn't say they were wrong, but that's a part of the American political tradition. And if I'm going to say black folks have a right after they feel aggrieved to rise up, I can't come back self-righteously and act like when they do it, it's anything qualitatively different.
Well,
Martin Luther King said a riot is the voice of the unheard.
Right. But the difference is,
What's the difference?
if black folks did that, they would have been.
We did it after George Floyd.
I'm talking about. I'm talking about.
L.A.
I'm talking about.
We did it.
We did not rush the Capitol.
It doesn't matter whether it's the Capitol, a bank.
It does matter.
Why does
Absolutely.
it matter? Why?
Because
what is so ontologically different about the Capitol? If you tear up a city and you tear up the Capitol, what is the difference?
The difference is those people in those cities were tearing up their own communities. They were destroying their own property. They were destroying the corner store.
See, that's where I disagree. I don't attach any significance. In other words, if
you know and I know.
No, I don't.
You know and I know.
No, I know. I don't accept that
If
premise.
if the Million Man March had turned violent,
absolutely,
it would have been blood running in the streets
and
for months.
And whenever
years.
there's a riot,
they let it happen.
No,
they do.
Listen, you know and I know from the history of riots and rebellions. Okay, there's always a group that some will go to prison, some will go home. That's exactly what happened on January 6th. Now, I'm not defending January 6th nor condemning it, because I don't condemn nor defend people that tear up property, private property, whether it's liquor stores or the 7-Eleven, in the wake of an African-American being killed, Freddie Gray. It's just that I understand, and I have the intellectual honesty to say that qualitatively, the same thing is going on. People that are angry, they stand up. Now, unless I condemn every time blacks do it, I'm not going to act like what happened on January 6th was unprecedented. That's a liberal point of view. That's a progressive point of view. Those same people 2 years earlier, when George Floyd was killed and America erupted in fire, they were defending it. So to me,
what?
They were defending the burning, the looting. They were defending. They took over whole sections of Seattle and other places. So what I'm saying is, as black folks, we always have to have, as James M. Tume said, the third answer. Okay? I don't follow liberal dogma. Okay? In fact, when I hear what the liberals say, I know that there's something in it that's deceptive of black folks, for black folks. When I hear what the conservatives say, I have to listen knowing that no, there's a third option. And the third option is an independent black analysis. And that's what we have gotten away from. We used to have black politics. Today, the black community is controlled by progressive politics. And that's to our own detriment, because the feminist movement, the LGBTQ movement, and other immigrants will benefit from all of those processes, and African Americans will continue to languish. And so our priority has to be our analysis. Okay, if you don't support any rioting or rebellions in that sense, then that's a morally consistent position. You say, if you tear up a business, if you tear up it's actually worse to me to tear up your own community.
It is worse.
It's at least those people went to the Capitol, which is their capital.
But they were trying to kill the vice president.
No, that's. Let me tell you.
You
something.
don't think they were?
Absolutely not. No, I don't.
They were on a hunt, brother.
As Malcolm used to say, talking about
they killed police.
Negroes. Talking about they breached our capital. They breached our capital.
No.
But I'm not
died.
justifying.
People died.
There was one white woman that was shot, and she was a protester. She died that day on the spot. Okay, that's the only person that was killed that day, a white woman who was shot. There were several police officers, one that died later, but it was not, if you look at the facts, it was not the bloodbath that the liberals continue to try to say it was. And after we get off this program, I'm going to Google it for you so that you will understand that these people are using the African American community, the moral outrage, the great numbers we have, and the discipline we have to vote, to push their own agenda. And they have continued to condition us to believe they're good, Republicans are bad. That's why whoever puts on a Republican uniform becomes the enemy.
Right.
And the rappers love Trump.
Well,
they love Trump all through the 80s. Again, that's after Central Park.
But the culture was young. The culture was aspirational, and some would
what
say
changed?
Well, I think that you're not the same person you were.
Okay.
In that period of time.
Okay.
Most people were broke. Let's just put it.
Okay.
Put it like that.
Okay.
Most people were broke. Donald Trump had the most swag.
Okay.
And rappers identify with white men with swagger. You know, now matter of fact, let me not even say white men.
Okay.
They identify with men with swagger.
They identify with rich people.
Rich people,
Okay,
but they
men
liked.
and women.
But we liked Shaft. We liked Carl Weathers. We liked Stallone.
Okay.
We liked Schwarzenegger,
Sure.
and some of us liked Donald Trump. He never appealed to me. I wasn't born here in New York City either, but I would imagine that if I did, perhaps I would look at him differently. I looked up to a whole Earl Graves, for example.
Absolutely.
And other people.
Absolutely.
Of that ilk were the ones that I looked up to. But I did like a few white brothers, like Steve Jobs was someone I looked up to.
Sure.
Not knowing him personally.
And we should always look up to successful people.
Yeah.
And we should teach our young people.
But But let me because you know we could argue Republican Democrat.
I'm not arguing Republican Democrat.
Okay, cool.
Just so you know, in your audience, I'm simply saying we have got to stop being beholden by one party and one way of thinking.
Okay.
All right. I am explicitly saying that there is no difference between either party. A party is a tool. It's how you use that party. And we have given everything to one party, and we haven't even opened up negotiations with the other party. And when they win, which they do, at least half, and in my lifetime, they've won more nationally than Democrats. we are out of luck. And we can't afford to sit 4 years out and advance wins the next term 8 years out and his second term. That would be 12 years where blacks are not even engaging the federal government on behalf of our people. I think that is a critical mistake.
Give us 5 things, Black. Well, you gave me some,
Absolutely.
but in terms of this gap in leadership and this gap in representation, what are some practical things that you think that Black folks should do? And and I wanted to make it practical because most people feel, as you've noted, that voting doesn't matter and that they are not a part of the process at all. So,
Well, that's the first mistake.
well, that's hard to change. I hit the streets to encourage people to vote, and I say it was 50-50.
It is.
And when I got to the young people, they really were like, yeah, it doesn't matter.
Right. No, you're right. I mean, it's very hard. But I will tell you that the system, our political system, is indifferent to whether we vote or not. In fact, the system hopes you don't vote. Okay? Because if you don't, in our system, and this is what Brother Nelson Mandela sat 27 years in jail for. In South Africa, blacks were disenfranchised.
Okay.
They had no vote. In the American South during the Civil Rights Movement, people like Fannie Lou Hamer, Jimmy Lee Jackson, who was blown away, people like Viola Louiso, a white woman out of Detroit, Goodman Cheney and Schwerner, people like Emmett Till were killed because we asserted our right to have a voice, to have a franchise. In a capitalist system, or rather in a democratic system, when you don't vote, you don't count. Okay? Ignorance really is bliss. Okay? You don't just vote for president, but you vote for your mayor. You vote for your congressman. You vote for your school board. And the fact that many in the African American community, all too many, are fully disengaged from civic society is why our communities have crime and violence and trash in the streets. But when white people move into that same community, it becomes safe because those people are civically involved. They're not going to say when some brothers are standing on the corner selling drugs, oh, this is the hood, this is just what it is. They're not going to say when rats have flooded a particular vacant building on the corner, they're not just going to put rat traps around their house. They're going to get involved and say to the local council person, the state representative, they're going to go to City Hall, Borough Hall, and say, hey, we got a problem on Fulton Street. We got a condemned building, an infestation of rats. And so, again, it's not fashionable. It's not honorable for blacks to continue to sit up and say, we don't vote. It don't matter. Well, damn it, if it doesn't matter, then you sit there and dig your head in the sand like an ostrich and continue to live in the ghetto and continue to be disrespected, and nothing will ever change in your community because you said it doesn't matter.
Right.
And so we got to break up that ignorance. That is a cataclysmic ignorance that has to be broken up in every possible way. It is not the white man's system to vote. It is not white folks' business. It is the business of every community. Look at Newark, New Jersey, where Ras Baraka is the mayor of Newark, New Jersey.
Shout out to Ras Baraka.
A city with 37,000 people. You know how many people voted for Ras Baraka for him to become mayor?
How many? I don't.
13,000 people. In a city of 37,000 people, okay? Or I think it's 300, I'm sorry. 370,000, I'm sorry. And so we have to...
13,000?
13,000.
And that's a chocolate city.
That's a black city. And so all I'm saying is, and you have to forgive my exuberance and enthusiasm.
You are a different person than just the beginning of this interview.
Yes, because I feel this passionately. That's why I get upset when people like Tariq Nasheed and others try to divide us, because you see, the one thing that black people in America had that made us the greatest black people anywhere on on the earth is that we lived in a system that had a what is called casually the one drop rule.
Yes.
And that basically said that if you had one drop of black blood, you were considered black.
Right.
Therefore, you were subject to Jim Crow.
Mm-hmm.
You were not entitled to participate in white society.
Right.
Now, that's a broad brush.
Yes.
Because in other countries, French-speaking countries, some English-speaking countries, Brazil, South Central America, they had different racial classifications.
Right.
So if you were light, bright, and damn near white, you were in a separate group. If you were brown, you were in a separate group. You were colored, so forth and so on, as they had in South Africa.
Right.
But in America, they said one drop, and all of you are together. Yes. That's why we had people like Dr. Charles Drew. That's why we had people like Malcolm X, along with people like Marcus Garvey.
Yes.
And what that did was it gave us the numbers and the genius, and it didn't split us up into subgroups. And so it made us one big group fighting for our advancement in this country.
Right.
And that's why today, yes, I agree that we need to focus on our African American community, but we don't need to divide that community. People from the Caribbean, people from South and Central America, we all came from Africa, and there is absolutely no question about that, scientifically, genetically, and so this FBA movement, it's okay if you it's just another name. Foundational Black Americans, just another name for blacks. But what's not okay about it is when we purposely try to divide black people, because some of our greatest black leaders are from the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So and not only that, but the way the triangle slave trade worked, many times blacks in the Caribbean, I'm talking back in the colonial days,
Right.
people would be brought from the Caribbean and placed on American Southern plantations. So there's no real time in which you could differentiate blacks from the Caribbean and blacks from the United States, as they have tried to do. Right. And so we've got to come together. Unity is very important, and knowledge is very important. I mean, it goes back to our great leaders, Booker T. Washington, Dr. Du Bois, Mr. Muhammad, and Jesse and Minister Farrakhan. We got to become wise. And I would say our generation, we have to embrace the fact that we live in America. We are Americans. Our ancestors fought and knocked down the doors for us to enjoy the full fruits of America. So we got to learn the political system, and we have to engage this capitalist system. There's nothing wrong with capitalism. Don't tell me you don't like capitalism, but you talk about how many cars Rick Ross has, because that's capitalism.
Right.
Don't tell me.
But those people don't say that.
Who doesn't say that?
So anyone that doesn't like capitalism doesn't like Rick Ross.
Well, that's not true. I teach at City College. Most of my students have been brainwashed to say they don't like capitalism.
But your students are how old now? They're not
18
they're not,
to 20
perhaps,
to 30.
Yeah.
I mean, I have different, City College, so we
Okay.
have a variety of students. But my point is,
I understand.
Don't tell me you don't like capitalism, and then you tell me about this drug dealer, Big Meech and Rayful Edmonds, because they were involved in capitalism.
Right.
You can sell a barbecue sandwich, or you can sell cocaine.
Right.
You can corner the market of the cocaine
You
market.
can sell a Bible.
You can sell a
for
Bible.
$200.
You can do that. And you know what? Trump is doing that. I guarantee you that's probably a business in his son's name to give his son. And so and that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And that's capitalism. And as they say in hip hop, don't hate the player, learn the game and play the game.
I'm gonna hate some of the players.
Well, I mean,
I know what you said.
It doesn't benefit us. That's my point.
I understand.
I'm out of being angry and sitting on the sideline. It doesn't help us. If it helped us, That would be great.
Yeah.
I mean, if being angst filled and filled with criticizing the country and being negative toward Trump had any accruable benefit, I would say all right. But it doesn't. The only thing that helps us is when we activate, we get involved. You don't have to take over the drug market in the community. You can just corner the market on corner stores.
Yes.
I mean, they're basic things that we can do. We have the knowledge today,
Okay.
and we just need to do that. And really, if we would be honest, there's not a lot of roadblocks in our path in terms of this country. Our disunity pretty much keeps us from achieving the things that we want to achieve. If we were as united as the Italians, the Irish, and the Jews, we could move forward. We can do it. So to me, I don't like to spend a lot of time blaming whites because that makes them superior. That gives them more power than they actually have. I like to say that black people have proven that we could go from the outhouse to the state house to the courthouse to the White House, as Reverend Jackson says, and he says we can go from slave ships to championships. We've done that. We can do it.
We can.
And that's what we got to do.
My issue, and I feel like I agree with you and I disagree with you. I agree and I disagree. So I'm
What's
trying.
the part you disagree with?
Well. Here's the thing. Let's take hip hop for example.
Okay.
Let's take hip hop. The issue I have is this. We love to talk about the golden age of hip hop. We love to talk about the mogul era. Right. I believe I'm a product of the mogul era, meaning at the very, very end of it.
Right.
But I was able to look at the rise of Def Jam, Russell Simmons, Diddy, Bad Boy, Suge Knight, and Death Row.
Right.
And all of those companies were fueled by who? Columbia, Interscope, parent companies, right?
Sure.
Ultimately, white companies, right? Ultimately, right?
Well, I mean, I never gave them that out.
Well,
because even though the white parent companies were ultimately responsible, they gave those men franchises.
Okay, all right. Well,
and they could have come together and worked together.
But
they chose to fight.
Let me stop you. Let me stop
you. Floss on each other.
Let me stop.
And shoot each other and kill each other.
Hold on.
Yes, sir.
Okay. See, you say things and I can't jump in because you keep going.
Okay.
So first, all right. Last of all, they did come together. Now
they did.
They tried, and they were broken up like that. Suge, I don't want to get into that because it's more nuanced. But Suge, J. Prince, and Irv Gotti tried, and before they knew it, before they could start the company, they were broken up, arrested, persecuted. That's a whole. That's myth.
I've heard that myth.
Well,
I don't know if it's true or not.
Right. Well, that's a whole nother story. Shout out to Maxine Waters. She helped out in that regard. But here's my point. Those companies bankrolled hip hop. And we could say it's our fault for not signing the next Public Enemy or the next conscious artist or the next this, that, or whatever. But a lot of the monies were dangled in front of those of us, and a lot of us went that way. We weren't either strong enough. We could say that.
And I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, we could say we weren't strong enough. But I think that it's also something to say about when you're dealing with marginalized communities, poor people, folks that aren't even, I don't want to, again, I'm not trying to give people excuses, but I will say that a lot of folks took advantage of the opportunity. Now, some, I do know, they didn't take that opportunity. In fact, I won't say the politician's name, but there's a brother who's a politician right now in Congress, and he didn't take the gangster route. He was a more conscious rapper, and they said, hey, man, we want you to do this. And he said, nah, I'm not going to do that. Right? But so many of us will go that route to change their conditions.
But if we do, though, and that's fine, if you say as a people that you're going to do that, then you can't very well blame the society or other people for the decisions that we make.
Mm-hmm.
And see, part of being free, when you're a free people,
Mm-hmm.
part of being free means making good decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't make good decisions, Suge Knight built a behemoth with
Mm-hmm.
Death Row Records.
Yes.
And he tried to employ brothers who had been in prison.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't run a business with people beating people up
Right.
and you can't run a business that way.
Right.
So that's not the white man coming in on you. That's
Absolutely.
you making yourself through foolishness so vulnerable that not only are you not going to build for the future generation,
Right.
but you're not even going to make it through that generation.
Yeah.
And so part of being free, and this is one thing that I learned when I was in the nation. If you read the writings of Booker T. Washington,
Mm-hmm.
if you read the writings of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, whoever we admire,
Mm-hmm.
everything they taught us is that with freedom comes responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I think, getting back to those 5 points, positive culture, but we also have to embrace being free.
Mm-hmm.
It feels very good to be able to blame somebody. But what do we teach our children?
Mm-hmm.
I've raised you. You got the right teachings, the right education.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got to go out into the world and make good decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're still blaming your parents at 40 and 50 years old, that shows that you missed something in
Mm-hmm.
life. And really you're wasting your life because
Yeah.
you're blaming your parents,
Mm-hmm.
and anything your parents got wrong, you could have fixed in that time.
Right.
That's the way we are as black people.
Mm.
When we continue to blame the system and slavery and so forth and so on, oppression, I don't call myself, I'm not a marginalized person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not marginalized. What would make me marginalized? Okay, so it's all in how we view ourselves.
Yeah.
It's what you're doing every day.
Right.
It's a labor of love. It's a lot of hard work, but you are fulfilling your vision, your destiny. You're doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, my ministry has been about doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not rich, but just because a person's not rich is not an indication that the system doesn't work for you.
Right. Right.
Everybody's not. America doesn't promise equal outcome, and
Right.
that's the mistake of what we're teaching these young people with the DEI movement. That's what they call it, that equity. They differentiate between the difference between equity and equality.
Right. Right.
America doesn't offer anyone the guarantee of success.
It's a lie that a lot of white folks believe it does.
Well, it doesn't, and
Right.
they will find that out.
Yes.
What it should offer at its best is equal opportunity.
But it doesn't.
Well, but here's my point.
Mm-hmm.
We also know by human nature, everybody is not going to work as hard as Chuck Creekmur. There have been people who started out with you did, and they've fallen by the wayside.
Every one of them.
How do you get equal outcome of hip-hop networks? There's no such thing.
Right.
If you stick with it, if you work hard, if you hold on to it even when it looks like it's nothing there and it's going to fall apart, you might emerge and be successful.
Right.
So we have to get out of these false standards. And if you have false expectations, you can't ultimately succeed.
Right.
So there's nothing standing in our way. There's nobody greater than us. We can do anything we want to do, but we got to do it together.
Yeah.
Damon Dash and Jay-Z, they did some great things, but we got to get over this ego. We got to get over falling out with each other. And we got a mayor in New York City right now. And let me just say this. That mayor has put black people in positions of power. All around him, you saw deputy mayors, first deputy mayors, police commissioners, and so forth and so on. And now we have a chance to reelect him.
Yes.
And look what we're doing. I don't know, he's under investigation. What difference does that make? As long as he's in the race,
Right.
let's stick with the horse that we know.
Right.
Rather than a horse, well, he went to meet with Trump. So what? or he's hard on the immigrants.
Right.
Listen, we keep making the same mistake, Brother Creekmur.
Right,
And that's why I've decided, for a long time, I had to grow into my own political ideology. When you're young, first I had Jesse's view, then Minister Farrakhan's view. But as you get older, my view today is that we can make it in this country. And we need to come together and continue to be positive, sane, sober, making good choices, and working together. And I don't think there's anything that can stop us. I don't think anybody can stop the black community when we're determined. I teach the civil rights movement.
Yes.
And I look at people who were cooks and maids.
Yes.
And they said, we're fired up and we ain't going to take it no more. And they worked together to bring down the Cotton Curtain. We can do the same thing in 2025.
Well, I want to thank you for gracing us with your presence.
I thank you.
We're going to have a round two. We're going to have a round. We definitely going to have a round two.
I'm ready.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your wisdom
God bless you.
was appreciated.
Thank you.
God bless you, too.